The rescue Marcus Chen had been stranded on Kepler 442b for 3 standard days when he first heard the crying. The sound cut through the howling wind of the planet's eternal winter, a high-pitched keening that made his teeth ache. He'd been huddled in the emergency shelter his escape pod had deployed, nursing a broken rib and watching his food supplies dwindle to nothing. The distress beacon was broadcasting, but rescue could take weeks. The mining station he'd evacuated from had suffered a catastrophic reactor failure, and he was the only survivor who'd made it to the lifeboats. Now he was alone on a frozen hellscape, with temperatures that never rose above -40°C and storms that could strip the flesh from bones. The crying came again, closer this time. Marcus pressed his face against the shelter's small viewport, squinting through the driving snow. At first he saw nothing but white. Then something moved near the twisted wreckage of what looked like another crashed vessel, maybe 50 meters away. The ship's hull was unlike anything in human design. Organic curves and a crystalline surface that caught the pale light of the distant star, against every survival instinct screaming at him to stay put. Marcus pulled on his thermal gear. The broken rib protested as he sealed his environment suit, but the crying was getting weaker. Whatever was out there was dying, and he couldn't just listen to it happen. The cold hit him like a physical blow when he opened the shelter's airlock. Even through the suit's heating systems, he could feel the planet trying to freeze him solid. Each step through the knee-deep snow was agony, his injured rib sending lightning bolts of pain through his chest. The alien ship had crashed hard, its hull cracked open like an egg. Strange bioluminescent fluid leaked from the wounds in the vessel, already freezing into crystalline formations. The crying was definitely coming from inside. Marcus activated his suit's headlamp and peered through the largest breach. What he saw made him forget the cold entirely. 3 creatures huddled together in what remained of the ship's interior. They were roughly the size of human children, maybe 8 or 9 years old, but clearly not human. Their skin was pure white, almost translucent, and he could see the slow pulse of blue-green blood beneath the surface. Each had 4 arms ending in delicate 6-fingered hands, and their heads were elongated with large, dark eyes that reflected his light like mirrors. They were clearly young, hatchlings. His mind supplied, though he wasn't sure where that knowledge came from. Their white skin had a soft, downy texture that reminded him of newly hatched birds, and they were dying. He could see it in the way they moved sluggishly, in the frost forming on their skin despite the ship's failing life support systems. One of them looked up at him, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The creature's eyes held intelligence, fear, and a desperate hope that cut through every rational thought about alien contact protocols and quarantine procedures. "Okay," he whispered, his breath fogging in the suit's recycled air. "Okay, let's get you out of there." Moving the hatchlings was like handling living glass. They were surprisingly light, their bones feeling hollow like a bird's, but they were so cold that he was afraid they might shatter at his touch. The first one he lifted curled into his arms instinctively, its 4 hands clutching at his suit's fabric. The sound it made wasn't quite a purr, but it vibrated through his chest in a way that made something protective and fierce wake up inside him. The journey back to his shelter was a nightmare. The wind had picked up, and the snow was falling so heavily he could barely see 5 feet ahead. His ribs screamed with every step, and the hatchling's weight, slight as it was, made his progress even slower. Twice he stumbled and went down on one knee, clutching the alien children to his chest and feeling their fragile bodies shiver against him. By the time he made it back to the shelter, his suit's power was down to 30%, and his hands were shaking so badly he could barely work the airlock controls. The hatchlings had gone completely still in his arms, and for a terrifying moment he thought they were already dead. Inside the shelter's warmth, they began to stir. Marcus set them down gently on his sleeping pad and cranked the heating system to maximum. Not caring that it would drain his power reserves faster, the hatchlings huddled together, their large eyes tracking his every movement with an intensity that was both unsettling and somehow endearing. He tried to give them water, but they couldn't seem to process it. Food was equally unsuccessful. They showed no interest in his emergency rations, but when one of them touched the heating unit directly, its skin began to take on a healthier, translucent quality instead of the deathly gray it had been. Showing heat, they needed heat more than anything else. Marcus made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed if there'd been anyone left to do it. He stripped out of most of his gear and lay down beside them, using his body heat to supplement the shelter's failing systems. The hatchlings immediately pressed close to him, their skin cool but not unpleasantly so against his. That's when he felt it, a gentle pressure in his mind, like someone knocking politely on the door of his thoughts. Images flickered through his consciousness, the hatchlings' ship fleeing some great disaster, their parents' desperate attempt to get them to safety, the crash that had left them orphaned and dying on this frozen world. One of the hatchlings made a soft, trilling sound and touched his face with one delicate hand. The contact sent more images flooding through his mind, gratitude so pure and overwhelming it brought tears to his eyes, and something else. Something that felt like the beginning of an unbreakable bond. As the wind howled outside and the shelter's systems hummed around them, Marcus realized his life had just changed forever. These weren't just alien creatures he'd rescued. Somehow, someway, they were choosing him as their protector, their guardian, their parent. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, as he felt their breathing slow and deepen against his chest, their first peaceful sleep since the crash, Marcus found himself smiling. Let the rescue teams take their time. He had a new job now, and he was going to do it right. The bond Marcus woke to silence, which on Kepler 442b was never a good sign. The constant howl of wind that had been his companion for days had stopped completely, leaving an eerie quiet that made his skin crawl. The three hatchlings were still pressed against him, but something had changed during the night. Their skin now pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow, patterns of light flowing beneath their translucent surface like living circuitry. The moment he stirred, all three sets of large dark eyes snapped open and fixed on him with laser focus. The mental pressure he'd felt the night before intensified, and suddenly his mind was flooded with sensations that weren't his own. Hunger, not for food but for warmth, for contact, for his specific presence. Contentment when he was close, anxiety when he moved too far away. And underneath it all, something that felt disturbingly like worship. "Good morning to you too," Marcus whispered, sitting up carefully. His ribs still ached, but the constant sharp pain had dulled to a manageable throb. The hatchlings immediately repositioned themselves to maintain contact, their movements graceful and coordinated, in a way that suggested some kind of shared consciousness. The HFY shelter's environmental readings showed the outside temperature had dropped another 10 degrees during the night. Without the wind to circulate the atmosphere, the cold was settling in like a living thing, trying to find ways through every seal and gap in his emergency shelter. His power reserves were down to 18%. Marcus tried to assess their situation rationally. Food wasn't immediately critical. The hatchlings showed no interest in eating, and he still had 2 days of emergency rations. Water was available from melting ice, though the filtration system was energy-intensive. The real problems were heat and power. Without both, they'd all be dead within 48 hours. One of the hatchlings, the smallest, which he'd started thinking of as Pip, chirped softly and placed all 4 hands on his chest. The mental contact intensified, and Marcus found himself experiencing the world through alien senses. The hatchling's perception was incredibly detailed, showing heat signatures, electromagnetic fields, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Through Pip's senses, he could see the failing power systems in the shelter walls, the heat bleeding away through microscopic gaps in the hull, and most concerning of all, the massive storm system building on the horizon. "You're trying to help, aren't you?" Marcus said, gently stroking the downy surface of Pip's head. The hatchling leaned into the touch, and waves of contentment flowed through their shared link. "Show me more." The connection deepened, and Marcus gasped as his awareness expanded beyond the shelter. Through the hatchling's enhanced senses, he could perceive the wreckage of their ship in incredible detail. There, buried beneath the snow and twisted metal, was what looked like a power core still showing faint signs of activity. The middle hatchling, slightly larger than Pip but smaller than the third, touched his arm. Marcus had started calling this one Echo, because its mental touch felt like reverberations of the other's thoughts. Through Echo, he saw a schematic of some kind, the alien ship's power systems, simplified and translated into concepts he could understand. The core was compatible with human technology, but it would require modifications to his shelter systems. The largest hatchling, Frost, because its skin seemed to shimmer with ice crystal patterns, showed him something else entirely. Images of their homeworld, a place of perpetual twilight and bitter cold where their kind had evolved to thrive in conditions that would kill most life forms. They were perfectly adapted to this environment, but only as adults. As hatchlings, they needed external heat sources and protection until their own internal biology could take over. More than that, Frost showed him memories that weren't its own, genetic memories, perhaps, or some kind of species-wide knowledge bank, images of their people bonding with other species, forming symbiotic relationships that benefited both sides. The hatchlings' need for a guardian wasn't unusual for their kind. What was unusual was bonding with an alien species. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "You're imprinting on me, aren't you? Like baby birds with their mother." The response was a flood of affection so intense it made him dizzy. But there was more to it than simple imprinting. Through their shared connection, he could feel their biological systems adapting, changing to accommodate their bond with him. They were literally rewiring themselves to be compatible with human biology, human thought patterns, human emotional responses. That's not normal, is it?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The hatchling's response was a mixture of confusion and certainty. This level of bonding was unprecedented in their species' history, but it felt absolutely right to them. Natural, inevitable. Marcus forced himself to focus on immediate survival. Personal crisis about accidentally adopting alien children would have to wait until they weren't all freezing to death. He suited up again, ignoring the hatchling's distressed chirping as he prepared to leave the shelter. "I'll be back," he promised, and felt their understanding flow through the bond. "I'm going to get that power core." The journey to the crashed alien ship was easier this time, partly because the storm had stopped and partly because he could navigate using the hatchlings' enhanced senses transmitted through their bond. It was disorienting at first, seeing the world through multiple perspectives simultaneously, but he quickly adapted. The power core was exactly where they'd shown him, though extracting it required nearly an hour of careful work with his emergency tools. The device was beautiful in an alien way, a crystalline structure that pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns he'd seen in the hatchling's skin. When he touched it, he felt a faint resonance as if it were recognizing him through his bond with the children. Back in the shelter, the modifications took most of the day. The hatchlings helped, their forearms making them incredibly dexterous assistants. More than that, their enhanced perception allowed them to spot problems he would have missed. Loose connections, incompatible interfaces, power fluctuations. They caught everything. When he finally activated the hybrid system, the shelter's temperature immediately began to rise. But more than that, the alien power core seemed to be learning from the human technology, optimizing its output in real time. Within hours, they had more power and heat than the original emergency systems could have provided. As warmth flooded the shelter, the hatchlings began to change. Their skin grew more vibrant, the bioluminescent patterns becoming clearer and more complex. They moved with increased energy, exploring every corner of their small space with curious efficiency, and their mental presence in Marcus's mind grew stronger, more detailed, more permanent. That evening, as they settled down for their second night together, Marcus realized the full scope of what was happening. The hatchlings weren't just bonding with him, they were changing him too. He could feel his own neural pathways adapting, growing new connections to accommodate their shared consciousness. His perception was sharpening, his reflexes improving, his understanding of the world around him expanding exponentially. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, as he felt their contentment and absolute trust flowing through the bond, Marcus found himself accepting it with surprising calm. Whatever they were becoming together, it felt right. It felt like coming home. Outside, the wind began to howl again, but inside their shelter, 4 minds touched in the darkness and found perfect peace. The discovery on the 7th day, Marcus's rescue beacon finally got a response. The signal came through the shelter's communication array with a burst of static, followed by a familiar voice that made his heart leap with relief and then immediately sink with dread. Emergency beacon. Charlie 77, this is UES Harmony responding to your distress call. We have your position locked and are beginning descent. E to 36 hours. Maintain your position and prepare for extraction. The hatchling sensed his emotional turmoil immediately. Through their bond, Marcus felt their confusion and growing alarm as his stress levels spiked. Pip pressed against his side, small hands clutching at his thermal suit, while Echo and Frost positioned themselves protectively between him and the communication console. "They're coming to rescue us," Marcus explained, trying to project calm through their mental link. "Other humans. They want to help." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fear flooded through the bond. Not fear of humans specifically, but terror of separation, of being taken away from him, of losing the warmth and safety they'd found. The hatchlings' bioluminescent patterns flared bright with distress, pulsing in rapid, synchronized bursts that hurt to look at directly. Through their enhanced senses, Marcus suddenly saw himself as they did. He wasn't just their rescuer or guardian. He was their anchor to life itself. The bonding process had changed them at a fundamental level, rewiring their neural pathways and biological systems to be dependent on his presence. Without him, they would literally die, their altered physiology unable to sustain itself, and he was changing too. The revelation hit him like a physical blow as he examined his own biosignatures through their perception. His neural activity was now synchronized with theirs. His hormone levels altered, his sensory processing enhanced beyond normal human parameters. Whatever they were becoming together, there was no going back. "I won't let them separate us," he promised, and felt their relief wash through the bond like a warm wave. But even as he made the promise, Marcus knew how impossible it would be to keep. The hatchlings were clearly intelligent alien life forms, first contact with a previously unknown species. There would be protocols, procedures, endless tests, and examinations. The scientific value alone would ensure they'd be whisked away to specialized facilities. The military implications were even worse to contemplate. His thoughts were interrupted by Frost, who had moved to the shelter's sensor array and was manipulating the controls with surprising expertise. Through their bond, Marcus felt the larger hatchling's focused concentration as it worked to enhance the passive scanning systems using principles from their own crashed ship. What Frost found made Marcus's blood run cold. The UES Harmony wasn't alone. 3 other ships hung in high orbit, their signatures partially masked but not enough to fool the alien sensors. Military vessels judging by their energy profiles. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was a recovery operation. Echo chirped softly and showed him more. The communications from the rescue ship weren't just standard emergency protocols. Buried in the signal were encrypted military codes, data packages about alien contact procedures, and most damning of all, orders to secure any xenobiological specimens for immediate transport to classified research facilities. They knew. Somehow they already knew about the hatchlings. The distress beacon, Marcus realized aloud. "It's been transmitting more than just my location, hasn't it?" Pip's response confirmed his worst fears. The emergency beacon had been recording and transmitting everything. Environmental data, biological signatures, even electromagnetic patterns that could have revealed the presence of alien technology. The military had been monitoring the transmissions for days, analyzing every scrap of data. Marcus felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. He'd served in the Colonial Marines for 12 years before taking the civilian mining job. He knew how this would go. The hatchlings would be classified as assets, studied, tested, probably dissected to understand their biology. The bond they'd formed would be seen as contamination at best, enemy infiltration at worst. "No," he said firmly, and felt the hatchling's immediate response to his resolve. "That's not happening." Through their enhanced senses, he began to plan. The alien power core had capabilities far beyond what he'd initially realized. It wasn't just providing energy, it was actively learning, adapting, growing stronger as it interfaced with human technology. The hatchlings showed him how to access its full potential, how to overload the shelter's systems in ways that would mask their biosignatures and create false readings for the approaching ships. More than that, they showed him their ship's remains held other treasures. Intact navigation systems, communication arrays that could reach across interstellar distances, even what looked like a small-scale matter compiler that could fabricate basic tools and supplies. For the first time since the rescue signal had arrived, Marcus felt hope stirring in his chest. "Can you make it look like we died in another crash?" he asked through the bond. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Echo had already identified several unstable geological formations in the area that could be triggered to collapse. Frost could manipulate the shelter's power systems to create an explosion that would register as a reactor overload. Pip showed him how their ship's remaining technology could create false debris patterns and biosignature echoes. It was an insane plan. They'd have to fake their deaths, salvage what they could from both ships, and somehow find a way off-world without being detected by military sensors. The chances of success were minimal at best, but the alternative was worse. Through the bond, Marcus could feel what separation would do to the hatchlings. Not just emotional trauma, physical death as their altered biology failed without his presence. And he was changing too, becoming something new, something that might not survive being studied and analyzed by military scientists. "All right," he said, standing and beginning to gather essential supplies. "We're going to need everything we can salvage from your ship. How much time do we have?" The answer came through multiple channels at once. Frost monitored the approaching ships while Echo analyzed the geological data, and Pip coordinated the power overloads. 36 hours until the rescue ship arrived, but they'd need at least 12 hours to implement the deception properly. As Marcus suited up for another journey into the frozen wasteland, he felt the hatchlings' absolute trust flowing through their bond. They weren't just following his lead. They were contributing everything they had to their shared survival. It was a level of cooperation and mutual dependence unlike anything in his experience. The wind had picked up again by the time they reached the alien ship, but working together made the salvage operation surprisingly efficient. The hatchlings' enhanced perception guided him to the most valuable components while their forearm dexterity made delicate extractions possible. Within hours, they'd recovered navigation computers, communication arrays, fabrication units, and most importantly, portable power cells that could sustain them for weeks. Back in the shelter, they began the careful work of setting up their deception. The alien technology interfaced with human systems in ways that should have been impossible, creating hybrid devices that were more capable than either technology alone. As they worked, Marcus felt his understanding of both technologies expanding through the bond, the hatchling's knowledge becoming his own. As the false dawn of Kepler 442b's distant star painted the sky a pale gray, they put their plan into motion. Controlled explosions brought down a cliff face near the alien ship's crash site. The shelter's reactor was overloaded in a carefully modulated pattern that would suggest catastrophic failure. Biosignature generators hidden in the debris would emit false life signs for exactly the right amount of time before fading to suggest death from exposure. When the dust settled, all evidence of their survival was buried beneath tons of rock and twisted metal. To any rescue team, it would look like a tragic accident. The human survivor attempting to salvage alien technology, only to trigger an avalanche that killed both him and any alien survivors. As they waited in their hidden refuge beneath the wreckage, monitoring the rescue ship's approach through salvaged alien sensors, Marcus felt a strange sense of completion. He wasn't human anymore, not entirely. The hatchlings weren't quite what they'd been born to be either. But together they were something new, something unprecedented, something that the universe wasn't quite ready for yet. The UES Harmony arrived exactly on schedule, its sensors sweeping the crash sites with methodical precision. Through their concealed position, they watched the rescue teams deploy, saw them discover the fabricated evidence of disaster, heard them report the tragic loss of all survivors. When the ships finally departed 3 days later, taking their false data and manufactured debris samples back to human space, Marcus felt the hatchlings' quiet satisfaction through the bond. They'd won the first battle. Now they needed to figure out how to win the war. The evolution 3 weeks after faking their deaths, Marcus realized they were being watched. The revelation came through Frost's enhanced perception during what had become their daily exploration of the alien ship's remains. Something was tracking them from orbit, its sensors sweeping their hidden position with a persistence that suggested more than casual interest. "How long?" Marcus asked through the bond and received immediate clarification. The Watchers had arrived 2 days after the rescue ships departed, but they'd been careful to mask their presence using technology that even the hatchlings' enhanced senses had trouble detecting. Their hidden refuge beneath the wreckage had grown into something resembling a proper base over the past weeks. The combination of human engineering and alien biotechnology had produced miraculous results. The matter compiler from the hatchlings' ship could fabricate complex materials and components, while human design principles provided structure and efficiency. They now had heated living spaces, advanced sensor arrays, and most importantly, a working spacecraft hangar carved deep into the planet's bedrock. The ship taking shape in that hangar was like nothing either species had built before. Human propulsion systems married to alien navigation computers, biotechnological life support integrated with mechanical engineering, weapon systems that combined kinetic projectiles with exotic energy fields, the hatchlings called harmony disruptors. But their watchers had arrived before the ship was ready, and the implications were disturbing. Through the bond, Marcus felt the hatchlings' growing concern as they analyzed the orbital signatures. These weren't human vessels. The energy patterns and technological signatures were completely unfamiliar. Another species? Marcus wondered aloud, and received confirmation that chilled him to the bone. Through Echo's racial memories, Marcus saw glimpses of the hatchlings' recent history. Their homeworld hadn't been destroyed by natural disaster. It had been consumed by something the hatchlings people called the Devourers, a species that sought out and absorbed other civilizations, adding their knowledge and capabilities to their own collective consciousness. The ship watching them from orbit bore the same energy signatures as the vessels that had destroyed the hatchlings' world. They followed you here, Marcus realized, feeling the hatchlings' guilt and terror through the bond. The crash, your ship's path. They've been tracking you across the galaxy. Pip's response was a flood of images and emotions. The escape pod that had brought the hatchlings to Kepler 442b hadn't been fleeing randomly. Their parents had deliberately chosen this remote system because it was inhabited by a species they'd observed from afar. Humans, who showed unusual adaptability and ingenuity when faced with impossible odds. The hatchlings hadn't just crashed here by accident. They'd been sent here specifically to find him. Not him personally, but someone like him. A human capable of bonding with their species, of creating something new and unprecedented that might have a chance against the Devourers. Your parents knew they were dying, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. They sent you to find allies. The confirmation came with a wave of grief so pure and overwhelming that Marcus had to sit down. Through the bond, he experienced the hatchlings, memories of their final moments with their parents, desperate, adults who'd made the ultimate sacrifice to give their children and their species one last hope for survival. But the Devourers had found them. Anyway, through their enhanced sensors, they watched as more ships arrived in the outer system, dozens at first, then hundreds, all bearing the same ominous energy signatures. The watching vessel began transmitting complex data patterns toward the approaching fleet. Information about the planet's defenses, the crashed ships, and most importantly, detailed scans of the hybrid technology they'd been developing. They know what we're building, Marcus said grimly. They want it. Frost showed him tactical analyses that made their situation clear. The Devourer fleet was massive, equipped with weapons that could sterilize entire planets and technology that could adapt to counter any defense. But they weren't attacking immediately. They were studying, learning, trying to understand the unprecedented fusion of human and alien technology before making their move. That hesitation was their only advantage. How long do we have? Marcus asked. The answer came through multiple probability calculations running simultaneously through all three hatchlings' enhanced minds. Perhaps days, perhaps weeks, but not longer. The Devourers were methodical, but once they understood what they were facing, they would move with overwhelming force. Marcus felt something cold and determined settle in his chest. He'd spent his entire adult life in military service, fighting battles against impossible odds. This was just another war, albeit one with stakes beyond anything he'd previously imagined. Then we finished the ship, he said simply. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. The matter compiler ran continuously, fabricating components faster than should have been possible. The hatchlings worked with focused intensity, their forearms allowing them to simultaneously operate multiple systems while their enhanced perception caught problems before they could become failures. But it was more than just their physical capabilities that made the difference. Through the bond, Marcus found himself thinking with a clarity and speed he'd never experienced. Complex engineering problems that should have taken weeks to solve resolved themselves in hours, as his mind interfaced directly with the hatchling's racial knowledge base. He was changing faster now, the transformation accelerating under pressure. His reflexes had improved beyond human norms. His sensory processing expanded to handle inputs from sources that didn't exist in human technology. When he looked in the mirror, his eyes had taken on a faint luminescence that matched the patterns in the hatchling's skin. The ship itself was evolving as they built it. The alien biotechnology was adapting to human engineering principles in real time, creating hybrid systems that performed beyond the theoretical capabilities of either technology. The propulsion system could bend space-time in ways that shouldn't have been possible with their available power sources. The weapon systems could disrupt matter at the subatomic level, while simultaneously projecting kinetic force across vast distances. Most importantly, the ship was bonding with all of them. Its biotechnological components were learning their neural patterns, adapting its interfaces to work directly with their shared consciousness. By the time they finished construction, it wouldn't just be a vessel they controlled. It would be an extension of their collective being. On the fourth day, as Marcus was installing the final navigation components, Pip suddenly went rigid beside him. Through the bond, he felt the small hatchling's shock and terror as it processed data from their orbital sensors. The Devourer fleet had begun moving toward Kepler 442b. Echo's calculations were grim. At their current rate of acceleration, the lead ships would arrive within 18 hours. The main fleet would follow within days, bringing enough firepower to crack the planet's crust if necessary. "The ship," Marcus asked. "Is it ready?" Frost's response was complex, showing him system status displays that painted a mixed picture. The basic functionality was complete. They could fly, fight, and survive in space. But the more advanced capabilities, the hybrid technologies that made their vessel unique, needed more time to fully integrate. They had perhaps 60% of their ship's potential available. Against a lone Devourer vessel, it might have been enough. Against a fleet designed to consume entire civilizations, it felt woefully inadequate. But Marcus had learned something important during his weeks with the hatchlings. Human adaptability combined with alien technology created possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. They didn't need to match the Devourer fleet in pure firepower. They needed to be unpredictable, unprecedented, impossible to analyze and counter. They needed to be exactly what they'd become, something new. "Launch preparations," Marcus ordered, feeling the hatchlings' immediate response through the bond. "We're not waiting for them to come to us." As their ship's biomechanical systems came online around them, Marcus felt the final stages of his transformation beginning. Whatever he'd been before, whoever Marcus Chen had been, was fading into something larger and more complex. Through the bond, he felt the hatchlings undergoing their own changes, their individual personalities merging into a collective consciousness that included him as an integral component. They weren't human and alien anymore. They were something entirely new, something that might just have a chance against the darkness approaching their world. The hangar doors opened to reveal Kepler 442b's frozen sky, and their impossible ship rose into the pale light of a distant star, ready to face whatever came next. The confrontation. Their ship broke through Kepler 442b's thin atmosphere like a sword cutting through silk, its biomechanical hull shifting and adapting to the changing conditions with fluid grace. Marcus felt the vessel's consciousness merge more completely with his own as they achieved orbit, the ship's hybrid sensors becoming extensions of his perception, while its weapon systems responded to his thoughts as naturally as moving his own limbs. Through the expanded awareness the bond provided, he could sense the Devourer fleet spread across the outer system like a cancer, hundreds of vessels, each one pulsing with the absorbed knowledge and technology of countless conquered civilizations. Their very presence seemed to dim the stars, creating dead zones in space where their reality-warping drives bent physics into unnatural configurations. The lead ships had already detected their launch. Marcus felt their scanning beams sweep across his vessel's hull, alien intelligences probing for weaknesses and attempting to categorize what they were seeing. But the hybrid technology confused their sensors, presenting readings that contradicted each other and defied classification. "They don't know what to make of us," Pip observed through the bond. The smallest hatchling's consciousness now seamlessly integrated with the ship's tactical systems, Our energy signatures are unlike anything in their databases. Echo, interfaced with the navigation array, showed Marcus the fleet's response to their appearance. The Devourer ships were repositioning, not for immediate attack but for containment. They wanted to capture rather than destroy, to study this unprecedented hybrid before adding its capabilities to their collective knowledge. That's what they did to our world. Frost added grimly, the largest hatchlings' memories bleeding through their shared consciousness. They surrounded our fleet, studied our defenses, then absorbed everything we had. Learned over millennia of development, but Marcus felt something the Devourers couldn't account for stirring. In his chest, the uniquely human quality that had allowed his species to survive and thrive against impossible odds on 1,000 worlds. Adaptability married to stubborn refusal to accept defeat, creativity born from desperation, and the absolute conviction that every sentient being deserved the right to choose their own destiny. They want to study us? Marcus said, feeling the ship's weapon systems respond to his rising determination. Let's give them something worth studying. The attack began with subtlety. Their ship's harmony disruptors weren't designed for raw destruction like human weapons, but for disrupting the fundamental forces that held matter and energy in stable configurations. Marcus targeted the lead Devourer vessel's scanning arrays, sending focused beams of twisted spacetime that caused their sensors to interpret reality incorrectly. The result was immediate and spectacular. The Devourer ship's navigation systems began reading phantom obstacles. Its weapon targeting failed as it tried to lock onto objects that existed only in its corrupted sensor data, and its communication arrays started broadcasting white noise as they attempted to process impossible information. But the Devourers adapted quickly. Just as the hatchlings' racial memories had warned, within minutes the affected ship had isolated its damaged systems and begun developing countermeasures. Worse, it was already sharing its analysis with the rest of the fleet through some form of instantaneous communication that bypassed normal spacetime limitations. They're learning, Echo warned. Each attack will be less effective than the last. Marcus smiled grimly as he felt the ship's biomechanical systems responding to his tactical analysis. Human weapons doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower applied at decisive points. The hatchlings' approach favored precision and harmony disruption. But their hybrid vessel could do something neither species had ever achieved. It could evolve its tactics in real time, becoming more unpredictable with each engagement. Then we don't repeat ourselves, Marcus said, diving toward the Devourer fleet at speeds that should have been impossible for a vessel of their size. The next attack combined kinetic projectiles with reality distortions in ways that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Mass-accelerated metal slugs traveled through folded spacetime, appearing inside Devourer ships' hulls without ever crossing the intervening distance. The targeted vessels began tearing themselves apart from within as their own structural integrity fields conflicted. With the spatial anomalies surrounding the projectiles, the fleet's response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids converged on their position, while gravity weapons tried to crush their ship between artificially generated singularities. But the hybrid vessel danced between the attacks with impossible grace, its biomechanical hull flowing like liquid, while its space-folding drive allowed it to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Through the bond, Marcus felt the hatchlings' growing excitement. This wasn't just survival. This was vindication of everything their parents had hoped for when they sent their children to find allies among the humans. Together, they were achieving things that neither species could have accomplished alone. But the Devourers had other strategies beyond direct combat. Through their enhanced sensors, Marcus detected energy signatures approaching from the planet's surface. The orbital surveillance ship had been seeding the planet with scanning devices for weeks, and now those devices were activating in a coordinated pattern. They're targeting the mining station ruins, Frost realized, the tactical analysis flowing through their shared consciousness. They know humans will respond to threats against their own people. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. There were no survivors at the mining station. He'd confirmed that during his own escape. But the Devourers didn't know that, and even if they had, it wouldn't matter. They were gambling that human psychology would compel him to attempt a rescue, forcing him into a defensive position where their superior numbers could be brought to bear. They were right about human psychology. Every instinct screamed at Marcus to race back to the planet's surface, to interpose his ship between the orbital bombardment and the facility where he'd once worked. The protective instinct that had driven him to rescue the hatchlings in the first place demanded he save whatever human life might still exist down there. But he wasn't entirely human anymore. Through the bond, he felt the hatchlings' cold tactical assessment of the situation. The mining station was already dead, had been dead for weeks. Attempting a rescue would accomplish nothing except playing into the Devourer's strategy. "It's a trap," he said aloud, as much to convince himself as to acknowledge the tactical reality. "Yes," Pip agreed gently, the smallest hatchling's consciousness touching his with surprising compassion, but it's also an opportunity. Through their shared awareness, Marcus saw what Pip meant. The Devourer fleet was positioning itself according to standard siege doctrine, assuming he would respond predictably to the threat against human installations. They were creating exactly the kind of tactical situation that favored overwhelming firepower over maneuverability. But their ship wasn't bound by normal tactical limitations. "The planet's core," Echo said suddenly. "Navigation data flooding through the bond. The geological instabilities we identified during our first weeks here. If we could destabilize the right pressure points." Frost completed the thought with tactical projections that made Marcus's breath catch. Kepler 442b's crust was riddled with fault lines and unstable mineral deposits. A precisely applied harmony disruption could trigger a cascade effect that would turn the entire planet into a massive kinetic weapon. The idea was insane, requiring them to thread their ship through the planet's molten core, while simultaneously calculating disruption patterns that would affect geological processes across an entire world. The margin for error was essentially zero, and failure would mean not just their deaths but the complete annihilation of any evidence that their hybrid technology had ever existed. It was exactly the kind of impossible, desperate, utterly human plan that the Devourers wouldn't be able to predict or counter. "Do it," Marcus said, feeling the ship respond to his decision with something that felt remarkably like enthusiasm. Their vessel dove toward Kepler 442b's surface at tremendous speed, its biomechanical hull shifting configuration to better handle atmospheric entry. Behind them, the Devourer fleet scrambled to follow, their formation dissolving as individual ships tried to match their impossible trajectory. As they plunged through layers of ice and rock toward the planet's molten heart, Marcus felt the final barriers between his consciousness and his alien companions dissolving completely. They were no longer four separate beings sharing a bond. They were something new, something unprecedented, something that might just be capable of surviving in a universe where entire civilizations could be devoured and absorbed by cosmic predators. The planet's core rushed up to meet them, and Marcus smiled with four mouths as he prepared to show the Devourers exactly what happened when you threatened something a human had chosen to protect. The transcendence, the planet's molten core embraced their ship like a living thing, the biomechanical hull flowing and adapting to temperatures that would have vaporized any conventional vessel. Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond individual boundaries as they descended through layers of superheated metal and crystalline formations, his awareness merging completely with both the ship and his hatchling companions until they became a single, unprecedented entity. Through their collective perception, they could sense every geological fault line, every unstable mineral deposit, every point of tension in Kepler 442b's crust. The planet's structure was laid out before them like a three-dimensional map, showing them exactly where to apply their harmony disruptors for maximum effect. But more than that, they could feel the planet itself, a vast, slow consciousness awakening to their presence. "It's alive," Pip's voice echoed through their shared awareness, wonder and fear mixing in equal measure. "The planet is aware of us." The revelation shouldn't have been possible, but their hybrid perception could detect things that neither human nor hatchling senses could have registered independently. Kepler 442b wasn't just a world. It was a sleeping giant, its consciousness distributed through crystalline networks deep in the planetary crust. Networks that their biotechnological ship was now interfacing with directly. Through that connection, Marcus felt the planet's history unfold in his mind. Kepler 442b had once been home to its own civilization, beings of living crystal and molten metal who had built their cities in the spaces between tectonic plates. They had been peaceful, contemplative. their entire culture based on geological timescales that measured change in millennia rather than years. And the Devourers had consumed them, just as they had consumed the hatchlings' world, just as they were attempting to consume every other species they encountered. But the planet beings hadn't died completely. They had retreated deep into their world's core, sleeping and waiting for something that could help them strike back against their destroyers, something unprecedented, something like what Marcus and the hatchlings had become. "You came here for us," Marcus realized, addressing the vast consciousness that surrounded them, just like the hatchlings' parents. "You've been waiting." The response came as a flood of geological memories, images of the planet's surface before the Devourer attack, showing cities of impossible beauty carved from living crystal and powered by the world's own life force. Then the darkness arrived, reality-warping ships that consumed not just the surface civilization, but tried to devour the planet's very essence. The planet beings had fought back the only way they could, by withdrawing so completely into their world's core that the Devourers had assumed them extinct. For centuries they had waited, their consciousness distributed and hidden, preparing for the day when allies might arrive, who could help them reclaim their world and strike back at their tormentors. Above them, the Devourer fleet was descending in pursuit, their massive ships struggling to follow the hybrid vessel's impossible trajectory through the planet's crust. Their reality-warping drives were creating chaos in the geological layers they passed through, destabilizing fault lines and triggering seismic events across the planet's surface. "They're going to tear the planet apart trying to reach us," Frost observed, tactical projections showing the cascading damage the Devourer pursuit was causing. "No," Marcus said, understanding flooding through their collective consciousness. "They're going to give us exactly what we need." Through their connection to the planet's sleeping consciousness, he could feel the vast geological forces building beneath them. The Devourer's reckless pursuit was triggering the very instabilities they'd planned to exploit, but on a scale far beyond anything they could have achieved alone. The planet itself was awakening, its anger at centuries of enforced slumber building toward volcanic expression. But more than that, the planet beings were sharing their knowledge, showing Marcus and the hatchlings how to channel and direct those forces. The harmony disruptors that were their ship's primary weapons could do more than just destabilize matter. They could synchronize with the planet's own resonance frequencies, amplifying and focusing geological energies with surgical precision. Together, the planet's voice whispered through crystalline networks that stretched across continents. "We can make them pay for what they've done." The first Devourer ship broke through into the planet's core just as Marcus initiated the harmonic cascade. Reality twisted around them as three different technologies: human engineering, hatchling biotechnology, and crystalline planet consciousness, merged into something that had never existed before in the universe's history. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Harmonic resonances raced through the planet's crust at the speed of thought, synchronizing geological processes that operated on vastly different timescales. Tectonic plates shifted in perfect coordination, volcanic systems linked into a single vast network, and deep crystal formations began broadcasting, reality-distorting energies that made spacetime itself malleable. The Devourer ship that had pursued them into the core found itself trapped in a bubble of crystallized spacetime, its reality-warping drive suddenly working against it as the planet's modified physics turned their own technology into a prison. Through their enhanced perception, Marcus felt the alien crew's confusion and growing terror as they realized their ship was being slowly converted into the same crystal matrix that comprised the planet's consciousness network. But the real target was the fleet still in orbit. Through their connection to the planet's distributed awareness, Marcus could perceive every Devourer vessel simultaneously, mapping their positions and analyzing their defensive capabilities. The planet beings had been studying the invaders for weeks, learning their weaknesses and planning their revenge. "Now," Marcus said, and felt the planet's consciousness respond with volcanic enthusiasm. The surface of Kepler 442b erupted in a coordinated display of geological fury. But these weren't random volcanic events. They were precisely targeted, each eruption calibrated to launch crystalline projectiles along trajectories that would intercept specific Devourer ships. The projectiles themselves were more than just kinetic weapons. They were extensions of the planet's consciousness, reality-warping crystals that would penetrate the enemy ship's hulls and begin the same conversion process, that was claiming the vessel trapped in the core. Through the bond, Marcus felt Pip echo and Frost's amazement as they witnessed the planet's counterattack. Hundreds of Devourer ships found themselves under assault by weapons that shouldn't have been possible. Geology weaponized and directed with the precision of advanced technology. Ships that had consumed entire civilizations were being overwhelmed by rocks and magma that bent space-time around themselves. But the Devourers were adapting, just as they always did. The surviving ships were already analyzing the crystalline projectiles, developing countermeasures and preparing to evacuate the system. In minutes, they would jump to faster-than-light speeds and escape to report their findings to the larger Devourer collective. We can't let them leave, Marcus realized. If they report back what they've learned here, they'll develop counters for everything we've shown them. The solution came through their connection to the planet's consciousness. The crystalline network didn't just extend through Kepler 442b's crust. It reached into space itself, connecting to similar networks on other worlds across the galaxy. Worlds that had been consumed by the Devourers but whose planetary consciousnesses had retreated into hiding, just as Kepler 442b's had done. An entire secret network of surviving civilizations, connected across interstellar distances by quantum resonances that operated outside normal space-time, all of them waiting for a signal that resistance was possible. "You're not alone," Marcus said, addressing not just Kepler 442b, but every hidden consciousness listening through the crystalline network. "None of us are alone." What happened next was unprecedented in the universe's history. Across dozens of star systems, supposedly dead worlds awakened simultaneously. Planets the Devourers thought they had completely consumed, revealed that their consciousnesses had survived and been planning revenge for centuries. The quantum resonance network that connected them all began broadcasting the hybrid technology specifications, sharing Marcus and the hatchlings' innovations with every hidden civilization still capable of fighting back. The Devourer fleet around, Kepler 442b suddenly found themselves facing not just one impossible hybrid vessel and a weaponized planet, but incoming projectiles from across the galaxy. As other awakened worlds joined the battle, reality itself seemed to be rebelling against their presence as quantum-connected crystalline networks bent space-time into configurations that made their technology malfunction. Through their expanded awareness, Marcus felt the Devourer fleet's growing panic as they realized the scope of what they faced. This wasn't just resistance from a single world. It was a coordinated uprising of every civilization they thought they had destroyed, all working together with unprecedented hybrid technology to strike back against their oppressors. The surviving Devourer ships attempted to retreat, but found their faster-than-light drives failing, as crystalline resonances disrupted their reality war.